Hey guys, this is Whyt Manga, the creator of PAPERBACK, and I'm here to create a tutorial on creating backgrounds. And the background I'll be making will be for my comic that's currently available. I'll leave links about it below, but I'm creating a background for my comic, and y'all just gonna watch me, watch me execute, and I'll just narrate as I go on, and turn it into a tutorial for you guys. I haven't done a video with backgrounds like this in a while. I have 2 already up on my channel. You can go check that out, and this will be the 3rd one, and there are more coming because nowadays I tend to record myself more often. So what I'm doing now is creating the lines, the dot at the bottom, which is not part of the panel that I'm actually drawing on, is the vanishing point, and sometimes the vanishing point may not be in the frame, and that's really just what's going on. What I'm drawing above is basically a ship. You're not going to understand what's going on right now, especially because you're not reading the comic, especially if you haven't read the comic, but that'll be you understand that a whole lot more later. So all the more horizontal lines are kind of pointing to a different perspective that's not even on the paper, that's just above, so you can say in a way that I'm linking it. And all the ones that are pointing more, I wouldn't say necessarily vertically, but because in a way it's still kind of horizontal, but the lines that are pointing to the vanishing point are all pointing to the vanishing point. And before you to truly grasp this video, you kind of have to understand perspectives a little bit, and in the previous videos I've gone over that a little bit, and hopefully you guys understand enough to know what I'm talking about. But right now what I'm drawing is not following any of those perspectives, because what you need to understand is that not all buildings are on the same plane and stuff like that, where they're on the same wavelength, if you will, that they're all going to have the same vanishing point. Some buildings will have different vanishing points. Even buildings that may be on the same street, they may just curve a little bit. Mostly if, say, you're walking down the street and the street curves, then the buildings that are curving will not follow the same perspective as some of the other buildings. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that not all the buildings will follow the same perspective. Also, when you're creating for scenes like this that kind of are cities, you have to kind of draw in shapes first, make it easier on yourself, and eventually go into with detail later. And this also applies to drawing characters. Sometimes you can just, as you can see, all the characters I've drawn, and the reason why I drew them, it was just so I wouldn't have to draw behind them. And you can see they're all faceless. You eventually go in and put in detail. I literally, at this point, at least at the point when I was drawing this, I didn't know how they looked. Same thing with the backgrounds, but the backgrounds may have some aesthetic that I already have in mind, just to keep a theme going around in the city or country or whatever, just to keep things a little uniform. But essentially, I currently don't know how the buildings look yet. I'll know a whole lot better once I'm done with the shapes, and then I'll look at the kinds of, say, windows that would appear in the cities, and kind of apply them and see where things fit, bridges, whatever. One thing to help you when you're creating backgrounds, especially kind of like city kind of backgrounds, will be to look at reference first. Eventually you may understand your world, because that's what this is. This is not like what I'm going to end up drawing is not like a city that currently exists, or it's not a modern day kind of background. It's really like an alternate universe that I've created. And then the setting of my manga, the aesthetic, is the theme, if you will. It's kind of like a ancient traditions of like different cultures, with a blend of science and sorcery or magic. It's kind of like how, so in a way it's kind of science fiction, but not really. It still has a feeling of something old, or back in the day. It has that feeling of how cultures operated back in the day, but with a little twist of science and sorcery. Something like Star Wars now, where it's all science fiction. It's not like Star Wars, because Star Wars is a little more science fiction, but Star Wars still has some supernatural themes within, with things like the Force and stuff like that. what I do to keep things, uniform is I kind of design the buildings on their own sometimes, and then just separate buildings. And when I'm drawing backgrounds and after I'm drawing the shapes, I'll look at the buildings that I've designed and try to implement things about those buildings into the buildings that I'm currently drawing with with a little more precision, with the ruler, and working on the edges, and making everything look a whole lot more accurate, if you will. And as you can see, most of the vanishing points there, because this is kind of like 2-point perspective at the I'll say 2 points perspective, but they're more like the building way in the back has its own perspective. Like I said, if you're going down the street, the buildings, they'll be curving with the street, will have a different perspective. But for the buildings, in front, it's 2-point perspective. But because the paper is so small, I kind of have to wing it a little bit, and sometimes I may use a freehand just because I actually see better without the ruler. But I use the ruler just because I want to get a straight, more precise line. But because the other point is not visible, I'm kind of winging it in a way. And with time, either you or anyone will be able to wing it just a little bit. Don't wing it too much, but to be able to wing it to the point where you can tell if it's right or wrong. But clear, you can see the first point that's below in the second panel, which is completely different, and I'm going to draw another background in that panel. And then I have I just go in with more detail. I look at the windows I've designed for my world and their aesthetic and see where they fit. Another tip would be to don't just randomly put windows. Kind of put windows that in places that make sense. Imagine you walk into the building. Like I said, when I'm designing these buildings separately, just buildings separately, not these ones, but buildings separately, just to get a feel of my world and the city that I'm building. I kind of first do research to see what works, and come up with new designs. Take inspiration from old drawings, old actual buildings. I use Google Images a lot. But what I was saying is, with the windows, knowing where to put them and stuff like that, and knowing how they look, especially from far and stuff like that, you kind of have to put yourself in the building and imagine where it be so it'll make sense. Because sometimes people put windows at the most awkward places. So right now I'm just going in with more detail. Like I said, I'll go in with the characters. What's at the top is a ship. Like I said, if you're reading the comic, you know what's going on. But right now I can't really explain without going off topic and end up talking about the actual comic. So when drawing backgrounds as well, things to keep in mind is have keeping things on the same, just keeping the lines parallel, not necessarily parallel, but all pointing to the vanishing point. So same thing with the windows, because everything normally will be straight, so they all have to point to the vanishing point wherever that is. Unfortunately for this video, I'm kind of winging it in the way, so even though it's 2-point perspective, you can't see the other points, but you can see the one that's in the second panel. And coming back to what I mentioned about the setting, like I said, it's kind of like a blend of cultures that I've been exposed to, with a mix of, not modern at all, but with a mix of science and magic and sorcery. I've heard people say something like the setting reminds them of Gintama, because Gintama is a setting where it's ancient Japan, but aliens have taken over. So there is some science fiction to it, but it's not necessarily like that, because it's basically, Gintama is basically ancient Japan at the end of the day. But obviously it's one of the things that makes it very unique, and one of my favorite mangas. But this is a little more different, where the science part of it it's not too science fiction-y, if that's a word. The science part of it's not that much. It's more sorcery than anything, more magic and more supernatural than anything. But there is science fiction to it, so not all that science and physics and chemistry would make sense, and I just kind of fill in the gaps with the sorcery. So even if it doesn't make sense, it makes sense because, you know, it's my world, and almost anything I say goes. You know, in this world, basically, I'm God. But if you read a comic, you kind of have a better sense of what I'm talking about. So it's like a blend of Asian traditions with not just, you know, Japan, or with other countries. So eventually there'll be kind of there'll be places that'll be inspired by, you know, Asian Germany or Mexico or Africa, Nigeria, or, you know, things like that. But with a science twist and, you know, some other things. So some cities will look different from other cities. So yeah, that's about it. I've gone into the detail with the characters. These are just, you know, bystanders and stuff like that. There's no major character here. And what I do after this, after using a pencil and a ruler, basically that's all I was using here. And the paper is the leader type, type A B4 paper, comic book paper. And I'm just using a regular pencil, and then I go in. When I'm drawing backgrounds, I use Sakura microns, and I panel in, and when I'm done inking the backgrounds with the micron, I ink the characters with the G pen, the leader 6 ink, and scan it to Manga Studio. Now this is where I tone in Manga Studio. I fill in blacks. Normally, if I want to if the building is far away, I don't shade it regularly. I just fill in the blacks. Or if it's in a lighter place, I just fill in with tone. I'll have more tutorials on Manga Studio on how I tone in Manga Studio and toning backgrounds in Manga Studio in the near future. But so far, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you like it. Stay tuned for more. Before we go, my book is available. PAPERBACK Volume 1 is available, and I'll leave links to check that out below. Hope you guys check it out. I'd like to thank those who have already purchased it. Much love to you, and thanks. I hope you guys subscribe to this channel for more. Like this video. Please favorite this video, because those are the things that make the video popular. Regarding my volumes, there will be an announcement regarding for the people who purchased the book early on. And I'll be announcing that soon. You might like what I have to say. Yeah, that'll be it. I'm out.